BYU refuses to lose the Big 12 championship. The playoff are in their own control, and yet they're underdogs this week. But I know why.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. Texas A&M is on upset alert. What about Alabama? Are they on upset alert? And some massive, huge playoff implication group of 5 games I will talk about on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Because guess what? Right now, new customers, you can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here. Why? Because I'm worried for BYU's sake, which is therefore a good sign for BYU. Is that how this works? I guess I think that's how it works at this point. So here's why I totally understand. You know, if you peruse our friends at FanDuel and the game spreads they have this week, you might go, BYU's 7-0, Iowa State's 5-2. BYU just had that big win against Utah. How is Iowa State favored by 2.5? Well, let me explain. It is very simple. In my view, Jake, you've got the emotional letdown factor after a big rivalry win at home. You are going on the road. Iowa State is also a solid team who happens to be off a bye and in desperation mode at this point in the year for whatever small Big 12 title and playoff hopes the Cyclones have. They have to win this game. A head-to-head with BYU would be huge. Maybe 7-2 in league play gets you into the conference championship game. But those 5 reasons stand out, and I go, whoa, Jake Hatch, this is an upset special, isn't it?
Yeah, here's the thing. Before the season, when we doled out what we looked at the schedule when they first came out, I looked at that game, speaking of Iowa State, and BYU going across the country to Ames a week after playing Utah, Spencer, and I said there's exactly one game on the schedule for BYU I believe is a scheduled loss, and it was this Iowa State game. But the 4 reasons you just laid out, they're absolutely working against the Cougars here, but in some ways, this is how BYU likes it. In
a lot of ways, yes. Yeah, all BYU needs to win is for me to try to convince myself and other people they're going to lose. That's all BYU has ever needed. Frankly, since this show has been Locked On College Football, that has translated directly to BYU's success. They are 18-2. 18-2 since Locked On College Football has existed. I just want to put that out there. So, in this spot, Jake, I look at BYU and I have dubbed them the BYU find a way to win Cougars. That's what they are. They're not going to blow you away statistically. They're not going to blow you away with the amount of NFL talent they have. They're not going to blow you away aesthetically. They're going to blow you away with the fact that they do what matters most, and that is put a 1 in the left column. That's winning, of course. So how does BYU find a way to avoid the upset here?
Number one thing is going to control the tempo of this game. If you looked at the player availability report that came out for Iowa State, that is an extremely, extremely banged up football program. Whereas BYU, I think there was a grand total of 6 names on their availability report this week. BYU is remarkably healthy for a team that's gone through some absolute wars already, especially this past week against Utah, Spencer. So I think the whole game plan for BYU is to go into Ames, run the ball with L.J. Martin and Bear Bachmeier, control the tempo of this game. It may end up being a lower scoring game as a result, but as you mentioned, BYU, they just simply find a way, and I think that's their best bet is just to go in there, control the game with their ground game, and grind out a win.
Iowa State fans may think that I am trying to jinx them, that I don't like them, that I don't think they have any. No, there's no such thing. There's method to the madness of why it's hard to pick against BYU at the moment. Let me throw this stat at you, Jake. You were just talking about controlling the game. How do you do that on offense? By running the football. What has Iowa State done well this year? They've defended the run pretty well. Oh, wait, in their last 2 conference games, they're giving up 200 per game on the ground. Cincinnati torched them for 260, and the Cougars are going to give them, I think, a heavy dose of L.J. Martin, some Bear Bachmeier sprinkled in there as well, maybe a couple of fly sweeps from Coach Roderick and the offensive staff. I think that is the biggest thing that Iowa State has to be able to control here if they're going to win. You let BYU go for 180 or more, game's over.
Well, and that's the thing. This past week, there was a lot of concern about if BYU could run the ball on Utah's defense, because Utah routinely has been one of the better rush defenses in the entire country, Spencer. What did they do? They ran for 200-plus yards, and that's something that Aaron Roderick pointed to as a point of pride for this football program. They know they can run the ball essentially on anybody at this point, and as banged up as Iowa State appears, and you mentioned the stats that they've given up recently, BYU's got to be licking their chops at the prospect of running for 200-plus.
Yeah, Rocco Becht in this game going up against the BYU defense. And look, Rocco Becht and the offense will have had an extra week to prepare for the Cougars defense. So at least there is that. I don't know if BYU's even thought about this game maybe not until Monday of this week, Jake, because Saturday, of course, it's all about Utah and the aftermath. And then Sunday is probably a day in which football is, partially in the cards, but perhaps there are other things that are important on Sunday as well in Provo. So starting on Monday, it's full-fledged Iowa State prep, and I guess, that is an advantage for Iowa State, but I just feel like every time you look at something on paper, whatever it is, and say, well, this is a disadvantage for BYU, they just manage to turn it around, and Kalani Sitake just finds a way to win. That's why I'm struggling to get behind Iowa State here.
Well, the biggest point I think you made earlier in terms of what the recipe would be for BYU to lose this game as an upset is the fact that they're coming off a rivalry game. Last year, this, Spencer, they came off that rivalry game and dropped 2 straight games, one to Kansas, one to Arizona State, and it ultimately cost them their opportunity to play for a Big 12 title. They have been a broken record across the board in all the interviews and appearances I've heard this week about, hey, we learned our lesson from last season. We'll see if they do, because the emotion of that rivalry game, it takes a lot out of these guys, and it hurt them for 2 straight weeks after the game last year. The hope is that they learn their lesson this week and they can grind out a win at Iowa State, even maybe if they don't have maybe all of the emotion they usually have.
BYU is one of 2 ranked teams to be an underdog this week. They both happen to be on the road whilst playing unranked opponents. Illinois travels to Washington, 4.5-point dog. BYU is a 2.5-point dog here to Iowa State. I'll let you make your game pick first, and then I will make mine very delicately for the Cougars fans listening to or watching the show, who I adore very much.
Here's the thing. BYU loves playing the role of underdog. I will never forget last season when BYU went to UCF, Spencer. UCF was a sub-500 football program. BYU was ranked, and they were an underdog to the UCF Knights. I know that made this football program extremely upset.
Even I picked BYU in that one.
So I think that they thrive in this role in terms of being the betting underdog, and I think they'll do the job again, get the win, move to 8-0, and likely move inside the top 10 nationally.
Now, BYU fans have to understand what is happening here before I make my pick. I'm taking the Cyclones to pull the upset. The Cyclones find a way to get this done. I don't think BYU's going 12-0, and this is the week. Last week was the week they were going to lose, but this is actually the week. I feel like that guy in Parks and Rec that keeps telling Leslie Knope the world's going to end.
Yes.
It's happening. Zorp is coming on this day. Oh, I got it wrong in my calendar. Oh, no, it's next year. It's next year that it's going to happen. That's who I am here, picking BYU to go down, which I can't wait to watch. But do I feel confident in this pick? No.
Parks and Rec's references are always appreciated here. We'll see how it all plays out.